Imagine waking up one morning and the headlines are screaming about something truly chilling. Your entire digital life, your emails, your social media, even your banking details all laid bare, exposed to the world. That's the exact thought that recently swept across the internet with alarming headlines proclaiming a massive 16 billion credentials leak. It instantly sparked widespread concern, didn't it? People everywhere were asking, is this truly the biggest data breach in history? Are my Apple, Google, and Facebook accounts suddenly vulnerable, just, gone?
Oh, absolutely. That reaction is incredibly natural when you're faced with such a staggering, almost unfathomable number like 16 billion. The initial buzz was intense, and it definitely made people question the fundamental security of their most important online identities. Understandably so.
And that's precisely why we're doing this deep dive today. Our mission is really to cut through those alarming headlines and unpack the actual reality of the so-called leak. We're going to try and distinguish between the hype that grabbed everyone's attention and the genuine threats that actually warrant our focus. And most importantly, we're here to equip you with concrete, actionable strategies to protect your digital life right now. Think of this as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, maybe offering some surprising facts and truly practical insights you can start using immediately.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here is how a single, seemingly astronomical number can generate such widespread panic. But the reality behind it, well, it's far more nuanced, and in some ways actually even more insidious than a single massive hack might be.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because the initial reports were absolutely shocking. We heard about a mind-boggling 16 billion login credentials. It was presented as one of the largest breaches ever, wasn't it? The claims were that it hit nearly all major platforms, including household names like Apple, Google, Facebook, GitHub, Telegram, even government portals. It sounded, frankly, like an apocalyptic event for our online lives.
And that's precisely where the critical distinction comes into play. The crucial clarification we need to make right away is that this is not a new, singular, groundbreaking data breach. It's not like a major company like Apple or Google was directly hacked, their systems cracked open, and user databases suddenly emptied out. That's not what happened here. Instead, what we're looking at is a massive compilation. It's an aggregation of previously leaked, recycled, and quite possibly fabricated data. Stuff that's been swirling around the dark web probably for some time.
Okay, hold on. So it wasn't like one super hacker just broke into Facebook and Apple and Google all at the same time. That's a huge relief right there for many listeners, I'm sure, myself included. But tell me more about this recycled data concept. How does that work exactly, and what does it mean for us?
Well, think of it like a digital dumpster dive, maybe. The data set basically combines old Infostealer logs and database breaches. Much of this data has already been exposed before, maybe bought and sold multiple times over on underground forums. So many individuals and organizations who were affected by those original leaks have likely already addressed them. They've reset their passwords, hopefully enabled two-factor authentication or taken other security measures, maybe even years ago. So it's more like a reaggregation of existing, potentially stale information. It's not indicative of fresh compromises happening right now at these specific platforms. The real danger is for those who haven't updated their security since those original breaches.
Right, okay. And fabricated credentials. That sounds even more unsettling. Are you saying some of this 16 billion isn't even real? Like completely made up information just mixed in?
Unfortunately, yeah, that's a strong likelihood based on the analysis. The sources indicate that the dataset probably includes manipulated or even entirely fake credential pairs. And look, this isn't a new tactic in the cybercrime world. It's similar to past incidents like the Alien TXT-based leak. Credentials were deliberately altered, maybe just minor changes to usernames or passwords, or sometimes just entirely random strings. These fabricated entries are often created for very specific reasons. Sometimes it's for brute forcing attacks, where attackers systematically try variations hoping one will work, but often it's simply to exaggerate the leak's reported scale and perceived value on the dark web. Make it seem far more impressive and valuable than it actually is. It also adds a layer of noise, doesn't it? Making it harder for actual victims to truly identify if their specific real credentials are part of the active threat landscape. It just blurs the lines of genuine compromise.
Wow, so the 16 billion figure isn't just inflated by old data, but potentially by entirely fake data too. That's quite a deceptive strategy. I heard Hudson, a well-known cybersecurity firm, did some analysis on this. What did they find about the actual numbers? Did they add up?
Yeah, Hudson analysis is particularly telling and really helps ground this in reality. Their data shows that the average number of unique credentials stolen per Infostealer infected computer is about 50. Just 50. Now, if you do the math, for a leak to genuinely reach 16 billion unique credentials, you'd need something like an unrealistic 320 million compromised devices.
320 million, that's huge.
It's astronomical. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the entire population of the United States having their devices infected and credentials stolen, all at once, basically. That figure is simply not supported by global infection trends. And Hudson Rock, who monitors, I think, over 30 million Infostealer infected devices globally, they've seen no recent surge in activity anywhere near the scale that would support claims of 320 million compromised systems. So this strongly suggests significant data padding, redundancy, and likely fabrication within the dataset. The numbers just don't align with observed reality for this to be a fresh, single, massive breach.
Okay, so the numbers just don't add up for this to be a brand new, massive breach that just happened. Makes sense. And you mentioned a lack of strategic value. What do you mean by that in the context of such a huge, messy data dump?
Well, unlike targeted breaches, where specific, valuable credentials might be stolen for a precise purpose, think about the Nobotex hack you mentioned earlier, where specific employee credentials were exposed to gain access to a particular system. This 16 billion leak is described more as a disorganized data dump. It's just a vast, unstructured collection of miscellaneous information, bits and pieces from all over. It lacks that strategic focus or the careful curation that makes a breach truly dangerous or immediately exploitable for a specific high-value organizational attack. It's more like a jumble of data, not a carefully curated list for a specific high-impact cyber operation. And that's a crucial distinction when we talk about the immediate threat it poses.
That's reassuring in one sense, I suppose, less targeted. And what about the exposure itself? Was this mountain of data just sitting exposed indefinitely, waiting for anyone to grab it?
There's a slight silver lining here, if you can call it that. Researchers found that these data sets were actually exposed only briefly. The sources note it was long enough for researchers to uncover them, but not long enough to find who was controlling vast amounts of data. Most of these datasets were temporarily accessible via unsecured Elasticsearch instances, or object storage, basically. Misconfigured cloud storage buckets left open to the public internet for a short window. This means they probably weren't continuously available for long periods, which likely limited their immediate widespread exploitation by, a vast number of opportunistic threat actors just stumbling upon them.
That's a small comfort, at least, but there was some conflicting information at first, wasn't there? I seem to remember Cyber News initially stating the data was recent, not merely recycled. How do we square that with what you've been saying about it being mostly old and recycled stuff?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the narrative around this particular leak definitely evolved as more research came out. Cyber News initially did state the data was recent, not merely recycled from old breaches. That got a lot of attention. However, they later clarified their position. They said that while the datasets themselves were indeed new discoveries by their research team, meaning the specific compilation of these billions of records was a fresh find, the datasets contained a mix of old and recent Infostealer logs, credential stuffing sets, and repackaged leaks from the past. So the package itself was newly discovered, but the contents inside were a jumble of old and potentially some newer data.
Ah, okay. So the overall compilation, the act of putting it all together and it being found, that was new. But the data within it wasn't necessarily all fresh off the presses. That makes a lot more sense now.
Precisely. And they themselves emphasize that overlapping records are definitely present, which makes it basically impossible to know the exact number of unique exposed accounts or even unique people affected by this specific data set. So despite that initial contention about recent data, the overwhelming expert consensus now from places like Bleeping Computer, The Guardian, Hudson Rock, is that this compilation is predominantly made up of previously seen or inferred information. It's really not a fresh trove from a singular recent hack of these major platforms.
Right. This brings us to an important clarification we've sort of been dancing around. The difference between a data breach and a data leak. We've been using both terms. Is there a crucial difference listeners should understand about how these happen and maybe why it matters to us as users, or does it matter?
That's a great question, and it's actually quite key to understanding the broader landscape of digital compromise. So a data breach typically involves malicious actors, hackers, actively gaining unauthorized access to a company's or government system specifically to steal data. They might exploit a vulnerability, use social engineering tricks, or brute force their way in. They break into a secure system, grab the information, and then typically use it for various nasty purposes like blackmail, identity theft, or launching further cyber attacks. It's an active, deliberate theft.
Okay, an active theft. And a data leak, then, is that more?
Oh, it's exactly. A data leak, on the other hand, often results from human error or some kind of misconfiguration. Someone might inadvertently leave a database unprotected and accessible online without a password, just sitting there open, allowing anyone who finds it to copy its contents. And this happens, unfortunately, more often than you might think. Another common way data leaks occur is through data scraping, where information, often stuff that's already public or maybe from previously breached sources, is compiled into a database. And then that database is inadvertently left exposed or perhaps just sold without explicit consent. Think of it more like information unintentionally spilling out into the public domain rather than being forcefully stolen.
So breach is theft by force, essentially, and a leak is more like accidental or negligent exposure. But for us, the user, the outcome is effectively the same, right? Our information is now out there one way or another.
That's the critical point, really. Regardless of whether it's a breach or a leak, the end result for you, the individual user, is that your information is now available online, often floating around on the dark web, and could potentially be used against you. Understanding the distinction helps us understand how it got out, maybe points fingers at who's responsible. But it doesn't change the fundamental fact that the information is out there and requires you to take protective measures.
That's a sobering thought, yeah, but an important distinction. So if this 16 billion figure is more hype and aggregation than a single new massive breach, what's the real threat? The underlying threat we should be focusing on that actually led to this compilation in the first place.
The real and persistent threat, and the confirmed primary source for the vast majority of this 16 billion credentials compilation, is a category of malware known as Infostealers. These are insidious, highly effective malware strains that quietly steal sensitive data, often operating completely undetected on infected devices for weeks or months. They were the true silent menace behind many of the headlines we see today.
Infostealers. Okay, that sounds pretty aggressive, like something out of a spy movie almost.
Uh-huh.
How exactly do they operate? What kind of data are they specifically designed to snatch? Is it just passwords?
Well, it's much more than just passwords. They are indeed designed to be incredibly comprehensive in their theft, practically vacuuming up almost everything sensitive on an infected system. Infostealers are malicious software that, once they get onto your device, immediately begin to collect a wide array of data. This includes credentials, obviously, usernames and passwords, not just from your browsers, but also from installed applications sometimes. Session cookies. These are particularly dangerous because they represent an active login session. An attacker might be able to use these to bypass traditional multi-factor authentication, MFA, because the system thinks the session is already authenticated. Cryptocurrency wallets. They'll target the keys or files associated with your digital currency if you have any. Internal development tools. If you happen to be a developer, they can grab sensitive access tokens or configuration files, stored documents. Any sensitive files saved on your desktop or in specific folders they're programmed to look in, browsing history and autofill data. This gives attackers insights into your habits and other potential accounts you might have. Chat logs. From messaging apps, potentially revealing sensitive conversations or contacts. VPN credentials, giving them a pathway to corporate networks if you're using a company VPN from that infected device. And email logins, which are a goldmine for attackers, as email is often the key to resetting passwords for countless other accounts.
Wow. That's practically everything someone would need to completely impersonate me online or cause serious damage. How do these Infostealers typically get onto your computer in the first place? It feels like you'd notice something like that installing itself.
Well, that's the insidious part you often don't notice right away, or at all. They typically infiltrate your system via common, seemingly innocuous vectors, things people click on every day. This could be anything from standard phishing attacks, where a malicious link or attachment leads to an infection, to malicious downloads. The downloads are a huge risk vector, often disguised as things like pirated software or cracks. Downloading illegal copies of popular applications is the prime way people get infected. Infected PDFs or documents. A seemingly harmless attachment in an email may be disguised as an invoice or a shipping notification. Game mods or cheats. Especially popular among younger users, but incredibly risky as they often require disabling security features. Fake updates. Pop-ups urging you to update your browser or Flash player or something that are actually malware installers. Or even malvertising. Malicious ads placed on legitimate websites that can redirect you to infected sites or trigger drive-by downloads without you even clicking the ad itself. Once executed, they operate stealthily in the background. They find all the credentials and other valuable data stored on your device and save them into what's called a log. This log usually follows a simple url.username.password format, or sometimes a more complex structure, including those session cookies and system information. These logs are then automatically uploaded to threat actors' servers, or sometimes immediately put up for sale on vast cybercrime marketplaces for others to exploit. And crucially, this isn't just a Windows problem. Infostealers absolutely affect Macs as well. And there are even variants targeting mobile devices now.
So even if I'm careful and don't click on an obvious phishing link, just downloading something I think is innocent, like a game mod or maybe even a document, could open the door for thieves to steal all my sensitive information. That's genuinely terrifying. And what's the broader impact of these infostealers across the whole cybersecurity landscape? Just how pervasive is this problem globally?
The impact is immense, and it seems to be growing exponentially. In 2024 alone, infostealers were linked to literally hundreds of millions of stolen credentials globally. They've become one of the most prolific types of threats out there. They aren't just a minor nuisance anymore. They are a primary driver for many of the most devastating cybercrimes we see today. Things like large-scale ransomware attacks often start with credentials stolen by an infostealer. Widespread corporate data breaches, rapid account takeovers, infostealers are frequently the initial point of entry. Cybersecurity reports consistently highlight that compromised credentials often gained through infostealers are one of the most common ways for threat actors to breach networks and gain that initial foothold inside an organization's systems. It's essentially become the new front door for cybercriminals. It's often far more efficient for them than trying to guess passwords or exploit complex software vulnerabilities.
And this isn't just theoretical, right? There are some pretty significant real-world examples that really underscore the direct, tangible damage these infostealers can cause when they hit the right target.
Absolutely. The direct consequences can be devastating, both financially and operationally. Take the Novatex breach, for instance. This was a cryptocurrency exchange. Just 2 employees' credentials were compromised by a specific type called the Redline Infostealer. Just 2 people. This seemingly small infection directly led to a staggering $81.7 million loss for the company and its customers.
$80 million from 2 infected computers.
It's exactly. Or consider the Hot Topic breach. In that case, an employee's computer got infected with an infostealer, which provided threat actors with access to sensitive cloud systems. This then cascaded into the exposure of data belonging to around 350 million customers. Again, starting from a single point of compromise via an infostealer. These aren't minor incidents. They demonstrate the direct financial and reputational damage these tools can inflict, even on large organizations that presumably have security measures in place. And we're also seeing law enforcement react on a global scale. Interpol, for example, recently conducted a coordinated international Operation Synergia, I believe. They took down more than 20,000 malicious IP addresses or domains directly linked to infostealers. That just showcases the sheer scale of this underground economy.
Those examples are truly impactful, really drive the point home. And I read something interesting about a potential shift in cybercriminal tactics related to all this. What's that about? Is the discovery of this huge 16 billion data set maybe signaling something new in how they operate?
Yes, that's an interesting observation from cyber news researcher Aris Nazarovas. He noted that the discovery of such large compiled datasets of infostealer logs might signal a significant shift in how cybercriminals are handling this stolen data. Historically, stolen data might be shared in, let's say, less stable or more transient methods, like private Telegram groups or one-off sales on forums, kind of scattered. However, this massive collection suggests that criminals may be moving towards compiling this stolen infostealer data into more centralized, more traditional, and more organized databases, like building their own searchable libraries of stolen info. This consolidation makes the data much more accessible, searchable, and potentially easier for them to leverage at a much larger scale for future attacks. It kind of signals a maturation of their infrastructure, making them potentially more efficient.
And why is that shift particularly dangerous for everyday users like you and me? What's the enhanced threat from these more organized databases compared to scattered Telegram groups?
Well, the enhanced danger comes partly from the scale and searchability, but also from the richness of the data often included in these infostealer logs. As we mentioned, they often include more than just simple usernames and passwords. They can contain things like session tokens, cookies, and metadata. These are essentially like a digital ticket or key that proves you're already logged into a service. The crucial danger here is that these elements can sometimes be used to bypass traditional multi-factor authentication, MFA. If an attacker gets hold of a valid session token for your bank account, for instance, they might not even need your password or your 2FA code to gain access. They can simply replay that session token, essentially tricking the website or service into believing they are you already authenticated. It bypasses the need for that second verification step. This makes even accounts protected by MFA potentially vulnerable if your device itself gets infected with an Infostealer that steals these active sessions.
Wow. Okay, that's a really critical point. Bypassing MFA. That really drives home that the 16 billion figure, while maybe inflated and recycled, isn't just a random number. It's a symptom of this constant underlying threat of Infostealers that created it in the first place. This isn't really an isolated incident. It's more a reflection of a much larger, ongoing problem in our digital world, isn't it?
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really underscores a more mundane yet profoundly impactful reality of data compromise today. While 16 billion is an undeniably huge and alarming number that grabs headlines, the truth is, data leaks and breaches, both big and small, happen every single day. It's constant. They've unfortunately become almost mundane in the news cycle, despite how serious they truly are for the individuals affected. It leads to this uncomfortable conclusion. It's almost inevitable that your passwords and data can and likely will be compromised at some point. The question isn't if some piece of your data surfaces somewhere it shouldn't, but more like when and what data it will be.
Mundane feels like such an understatement when we're talking about billions of records and the daily erosion of our privacy and security. To really put this in context, maybe we should look at some other major breaches that have occurred recently. Our source material highlighted quite a few incidents, even just within the last year or so, demonstrating the sheer variety and scale of these threats. It's not just this one big number.
Absolutely. That list from Bright Defense is quite extensive, and it powerfully highlights the sheer volume, the variety, and the constant nature of threats that organizations and individuals face. Instead of just reading out a long, dry list, maybe let's pull out a few key examples from the past year or so, ones that illustrate common attack vectors or particularly impactful scenarios.
Yeah, okay, that sounds like a good approach. Give us some of the most illustrative ones that show the different ways this happens.
All right. Let's start with something impacting the physical world. The supply chain attack. In June 2025, we saw the UNFI cyber attack. UNFI is a major grocery supplier. That attack caused significant disruption in the grocery supply chain, impacting even large retailers like Whole Foods. It illustrates how a single vulnerability in a key supplier can have these cascading effects across an entire industry, impacting consumers in very tangible ways, like delays in getting products on shelves. Moving to May 2025, there was that report of a massive Google and Apple breach. Now, importantly, this wasn't a direct hack of Google or Apple systems, but rather an exposure of 184 million login credentials related to users of those platforms, apparently without encryption. Infostealer malware was heavily suspected as the root cause here. This really brings home that Infostealer threat again, showing how common malware hitting individual users can lead to these truly enormous data dumps, affecting users of major platforms. Also in May 2025, a particularly concerning one, the PowerSchool breach. PowerSchool provides software for schools. This breach affected potentially 62.4 million students and 9.5 million educators. The company apparently initially paid a ransom, but the hackers then reportedly resumed extortion attempts later, exposing sensitive data like social security numbers and medical records.
Oh, wow. Students and educators, SSNs and medical records exposed, even after a ransom was paid. It's deeply troubling. And the point about ransom payments not guaranteeing safety is critical.
It absolutely is. It's a huge gamble. Looking back a bit further, maybe March 2025, in Australia, several superannuation funds, like retirement funds, were hit by credential stuffing attacks. This led to over $500,000 lost by just 4 Australian super customers alone. This is a classic example of password reuse coming back to bite people. Attackers took credentials leaked from other breaches entirely and simply automatically tried logging into the retirement fund accounts, hoping for a match. And sadly, they found some. Then jumping back to May 2024, remember the Ticketmaster incident. That was a significant breach, exposing personal and potentially financial data of approximately 560 million customers globally. That incident was later traced back to a vulnerability in a third-party cloud service provider they used called Snowflake. So this underscores the increasing risk of supply chain attacks again. Companies are often only as secure as their weakest third-party vendor.
Right. This curated list, focusing on the patterns, supply chain, info stealers, credential stuffing, third-party risk, ransom failures, paints a much clearer, maybe scarier picture than just one big number. It truly reinforces your earlier point. It's almost inevitable that your passwords and data can and will be compromised at some point, which makes personal protection absolutely paramount, doesn't it? We can't just rely on companies to never get breached.
It really does. The sheer volume and relentless nature of these incidents mean we basically have to operate under the assumption that some piece of our data is already out there, or will be at some point. And this mindset, shifting from if I'm compromised to maybe when I'm compromised, how do I limit the damage? Brings us to the critical final segment, what you, the listener, can actually do about it. What concrete steps can you take starting today?
Yes, this is where it gets incredibly empowering, I think. We can go from passive concern, maybe even anxiety, to taking concrete, actionable steps. So if I'm sitting here listening, worried my data might be part of these billions of exposed records or the next breach, where do I even begin? What's step one?
Okay, the immediate first action for anyone concerned is to check your exposure. You can, and absolutely should, use services like Has I Been Pwned? That's PDAY-NAED. It's a free, trustworthy service run by security expert Troy Hunt. It allows you to quickly check if your email address or even specific passwords have appeared in any known data breaches that have been cataloged. It's a vital first check. Also, many modern password manager tools, like Google's built-in password manager in Chrome or standalone ones, often offer a dark web report feature. These tools actively monitor for your exposed information and can alert you if your credentials pop up somewhere they shouldn't. It's a vital first step to understand your current risk profile.
Okay, so check Have I Been Pwned, check my password manager's tools. That's the starting point for diagnosis. Now for the security homework you mentioned earlier, what are the absolute foundational security practices we must adopt to build a stronger digital fortress?
The very first, and honestly arguably the most critical step, because it's still so often overlooked, is to use unique, strong passwords for every single online account. No exceptions. Password reuse is consistently highlighted by security experts as one of the easiest ways you can set yourself up to get hacked. It's just handing attackers the keys. If you use the same password on multiple sites and just one of those sites gets compromised, then every single account using that same password becomes immediately vulnerable to those credential stuffing attacks we mentioned. Attackers will try that leaked password everywhere. So you need a unique, complex password, ideally a long passphrase, maybe 12, 16 characters or more, with a mix of numbers, symbols, uppercase, and lowercase letters for every single site. Think of it as needing a unique key for every single lock you own. Tools like Password Monster's Password Strength Meter, or the ones built into password managers, can help you gauge how robust your choices are. Longer is generally better than just complexity.
Right, but that sounds like an impossible task for my brain. Remembering dozens, maybe hundreds of unique, complex passwords, how do you even manage that without just writing them all down in a sticky note, which seems like a bad idea?
That's precisely where password managers come in, and I really cannot stress enough how indispensable they are in today's world. They are secure applications that function essentially as an encrypted digital vault for all your unique, strong passwords. They don't just securely store them, they can also generate new complex passwords for you automatically with a single click, so you don't even have to think them up. They autofill credentials when you visit a login page, saving you time and hassle. They can notify you if any of your stored credentials appear in a known breach, prompting you to go and change just that one password. And increasingly, they support Passkeys, which we should definitely talk about more. Highly recommended options include Bitwarden, which is open source, and Password. Proton Pass is another good one. LastPass is also a popular choice. It's functional, but it's worth noting it has had some past security incidents, so it's always good to be aware of the history and research their current security posture if you're considering them. But the true beauty of using any reputable password manager is it allows you to free up all that precious mental memory for more important things. You generally only need to remember one strong master password, the key to the vault itself. Make that one super strong.
That's an excellent point. My brain is definitely at a capacity just trying to remember my Netflix password, let alone 100 unique, complex ones. So, okay, password managers are basically essential. What's next on our security homework list?
Next up, absolutely critical, is multi-factor authentication, MFA, often called two-factor authentication or 2FA. This is a crucial defense layer that acts like a second lock on your account, beyond just the password. As the sources point out, and it's worth repeating, if you have 2FA enabled, even if a password at a site is compromised, threat actors generally cannot access the account without your 2FA code. Because even if they manage to get your password from a leak or Infostealer, they'd still need that second factor, something you have, like your phone, or something you are, like your fingerprint, to get the code. We're seeing it become standard. Google, for example, is reportedly moving towards requiring two-step verification for all Gmail accounts eventually, signaling its fundamental importance. Don't treat it as optional anymore.
Right, so it's moving from a recommendation to basically a baseline requirement for important accounts. Now, what's the best way to do 2FA? I usually just get a text message with a code sent to my phone. Is that good enough, or are there better ways?
Look, SMS texts for 2FA are certainly much better than having no second factor at all. So if that's all the service offers, definitely use it. However, we generally recommend using dedicated authentication apps whenever possible. Apps like Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, Authy, or even hardware keys like YubiKeys are more secure. This is because SMS texts are vulnerable to something called SIM swapping or SIM jacking attacks. That's where a malicious actor tricks your mobile phone carrier into porting your phone number over to a SIM card they control. Once they control your number, they can intercept all your incoming texts, including those SMS 2FA codes, allowing them to bypass that security layer relatively easily if they target you specifically. Authentication apps, on the other hand, generate these time-sensitive codes directly on your device itself, or require physical tap for hardware keys. They're not tied to your phone number in the same way, making them much more secure against SIM swapping. And for organizations, MFA is absolutely vital, especially remembering what we said about Infostealer logs, sometimes containing those session tokens and cookies that might bypass a simple password check. MFA adds that critical additional hurdle.
That SIM swapping risk is scary. Okay, so authenticator apps are better. This reminds me of something else that's been in the news a lot lately, Passkeys. Are they related to 2FA, or are they something new entirely that maybe builds on these concepts?
Passkeys are indeed the next evolution, yeah? They're a fantastic development towards a truly password-free method of logging in, and they're being championed by all of the major tech companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, the FIDO Alliance. They're designed to be both more secure and more user-friendly, hopefully replacing passwords for many things eventually. The main benefits are that they leverage strong public key cryptography and are typically tied to a trusted device, usually your smartphone or computer. You authenticate using biometric information like your fingerprint or facial recognition, which is stored securely on your device. It never leaves. This unlocks the private key stored on the device, which then proves your identity to a website or service. Because the actual secret, the private key, stays on your device and they rely on this secure crypto. Passkeys cannot be easily guessed, cracked by brute force, phished because they're tied to specific websites, or accidentally shared like a password can. They offer superior security and often more convenience compared to typing passwords and even many forms of 2FA. We're seeing wider adoption. Facebook, for example, is rolling out passkey login options for Messenger and MetaPay soon. So start enabling them where you can.
That really does sound like a potential game changer for both convenience and security. Getting rid of passwords. Wow. Okay, what about protecting our actual devices, our computers, our phones from getting infected with these very Infostealers we've been talking about in the first place? How do we stop them getting on there?
Right, that falls under the umbrella of endpoint security. Essentially, this means having robust antivirus or anti-malware software actively running and updated on all your devices. Its primary function is to protect you from malware before an infection can actually take hold, or to detect and remove it quickly if it does get through. It actively scans files you download, emails you receive, websites you visit, and software you install, flagging or quarantining anything harmful it detects based on known signatures or suspicious behavior. You have built-in options that are pretty good these days, like Windows Defender for PCs, Apple's built-in X Protect for Macs, or Google Play Protect for Android devices. These provide a solid baseline. However, paid antivirus software from reputable vendors often offers more frequent advanced updates, sometimes more comprehensive scanning engines, and often bundles in extra features like a basic VPN, firewall controls, or even aspects of a password manager. For Infostealer prevention specifically, having a strong, up-to-date antivirus solution is absolutely crucial. It's your first line of defense against those malicious downloads. And here's a key practical tip again. If you ever suspect you might have an Infostealer infection, maybe accounts are acting weirdly, make sure you scan your device thoroughly with your antivirus before you start changing any passwords online.
Why before?
Because if the Infostealer is still active on your machine, it could potentially capture those brand new strong passwords you're creating as you type them in, completely defeating the purpose of changing them. Clean the machine first, then change the passwords.
Ah, that's a clever but chilling point. Clean first, then change. Got it. So we talked about human error playing a part in leaks. What about human awareness as a defense against these threats, training ourselves and others?
Absolutely crucial. That brings us to employee training and security awareness. And really, employee in the broadest sense here, this applies just as much to you and your family members as it does in a corporate setting. The human element is very often the weakest link in any security chain. Attackers know this. That's why phishing is so common. Comprehensive training on how to spot phishing attempts, suspicious links, urgent requests, poor grammar, how to recognize social engineering tactics, someone trying to trick you into giving information, and the importance of avoiding risky downloads, like pirated software or unknown attachments, can significantly reduce the chances of Infostealer infections and other compromises. Studies consistently show that robust security awareness programs can cut cyber risks within organizations by up to 60%. That's a huge impact. And this isn't just for big companies, it's vital for your personal life too. Share this knowledge. Talk to older relatives who might be more trusting. Talk to younger family members about the risks of game cheats or dodgy downloads. Teach them how to spot scams, how to verify requests, did you really send me this link? And generally how to be more digitally savvy and skeptical. A well-informed user is genuinely your best defense.
That's great advice, extending security awareness to the family. What other practical steps can we take, maybe things we don't always think about, to reduce our overall digital footprint and risk profile?
Yeah, there are a few more good housekeeping tips. You should regularly audit access points for your critical systems, both personal and work-related, if applicable. This means routinely reviewing who or what has access, and maybe rotating credentials periodically for things like your home Wi-Fi, VPNs if you use them, your primary webmail, project management tools like Jira if you use them for work, or cloud storage accounts like Dropbox or Google Drive. Don't just set them up and forget them. Another simple but highly effective step is to delete unused accounts and apps. Seriously, go through your phone, your old bookmarks, every old social media profile you abandoned years ago, every forgotten online shopping account, every dormant app you downloaded once. Each one is a potential point of exposure. It can be breached without you even knowing because you don't use it anymore. Keep your digital footprint as small and tidy as possible. And critically important, update your software and enable automatic updates wherever possible. This goes for your operating system, Windows, macOS, iOS, Android, your web browsers, and all the applications you use regularly. These updates aren't just about adding new features. They very often contain vital security patches that close vulnerabilities that attackers have discovered. Procrastinating on updates is literally like leaving your digital doors and windows unlocked and wide open for criminals to walk through. Don't do it.
That's a really comprehensive to-do list for proactive defense. Audit, delete, update. Simple but powerful. But what if, despite our best efforts, our data is already out there from past breaches? Or what if we want to proactively limit what's publicly available about us online, maybe on those data broker sites? Are there tools for that?
Yes, definitely. If you're concerned your data is already out there, or you just want to proactively limit what's publicly accessible, you can consider using data removal tools or services. There are services like Incogni, DeleteMe, Canary that specialize in finding and sending automated requests for the removal of your personal data from hundreds of different data broker websites. These are sites that collect and sell your information, often scraped from public records or other sources. Reducing your presence on these sites can limit your attack surface. Some VPN services or advanced antivirus software packages are also starting to include features like this as part of their bundles. It's essentially about reducing the amount of information readily available about you online, making it harder for criminals, or anyone really, to piece together a full profile of you for targeting or identity theft purposes.
Okay, data removal services. And finally, what about a more comprehensive safety net? Something like identity theft protection. We hear ads for those. Is that a worthwhile investment in this landscape?
Identity theft protection services like Aura, IdentiGuard, LifeLock, and others are designed to be a crucial safety net for when, despite all your best efforts with passwords, MFA, and antivirus, your data is compromised and potentially misused. They typically work by proactively monitoring your financial accounts, banking, credit cards, your credit reports, and other online accounts for signs of fraud or suspicious activity. They also often keep a watchful eye on your social security number, medical records, and other sensitive personal information across various databases and the dark web, alerting you if it pops up unexpectedly. A key benefit is that these services often include identity theft insurance. This can help you recover funds lost to fraud, up to a certain limit. And they usually provide expert support specialists who can help you with the often complex and stressful process of placing credit freezes, resolving fraudulent accounts, or obtaining new identification documents if yours are compromised. However, there's a crucial timing note here. Identity theft protection generally only works effectively to cover losses if you've signed up before a major incident occurs or before extensive financial damage is done. It's preventative monitoring and recovery assistance, not a magic undo button for past theft.
Right, so it's more about early detection and help with the cleanup rather than solely reacting after your bank account is already emptied. That makes sense. And what about the cost of all these layers? Password manager, maybe paid antivirus, maybe identity theft protection. It can add up quickly, can it?
It's true, it absolutely can get expensive, especially if you're trying to implement everything at once. So if you're working with a tight budget, I'd strongly suggest prioritizing the foundational layers first. That means definitely getting a good password manager. There are excellent free options like Bitwarden's free tier, and ensuring your endpoint security is solid, even if it's just making sure the built-in tools like Windows Defender are active and updated, may be supplemented by a free reputable scanner occasionally. And enable MFA everywhere you can, that's usually free. Then, once those foundational pieces are firmly in place, you can consider adding layers like paid antivirus for more features, or identity theft protection, especially as your financial assets or digital presence grows, making you a more attractive target. Look for family plans too. Many reputable providers offer bundles or family plans that can make it much more affordable to protect everyone you care about under one umbrella subscription. Ultimately, yes, it's an investment, but think of it as an investment in your peace of mind and your financial security in what is undeniably an increasingly compromised digital world. The cost of prevention is almost always significantly less than the stress, time, and money involved in recovering after a major identity theft incident.
That's a really great perspective. Prioritize the foundations, then layer up as needed. This has been incredibly insightful, truly a valuable deep dive into the practical realities of digital security today. So, wrapping this all up, what's the final takeaway message from this deep dive into the 16 billion credentials leak and the broader landscape of digital threats we've discussed?
I think the final takeaway is that while the whole 16 billion credentials leak was initially framed as this terrifying crisis of brand new stolen data, it is, in reality, less a groundbreaking breach and much more a recycled, inflated dataset, probably designed at least partly to generate fear and maybe exploit existing vulnerabilities from past incidents. However, this absolutely doesn't diminish its significance. Instead, it serves as a really powerful, almost unavoidable reminder of the relentless, ongoing threat posed by those insidious infostealers and the pervasive, almost inevitable reality of widespread data compromise in our modern lives. It's a symptom, not the core disease itself.
Absolutely. It means, like you said, we can't really unring the bell of information leaks. Our data is out there in various forms, scattered across the internet from countless past breaches and leaks, and it will likely continue to be. But the true significance of this deep dive, hopefully, is to empower you, the listener, to help you transform your online security habits from maybe passive worry into proactive defense. It's really about empowerment, not being paralyzed by fear.
Precisely. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means the time for that password spring cleaning. We talked about getting unique passwords everywhere. Using a manager is not just recommended, it's pretty much essential now. It means maybe starting to move towards more of a zero trust mindset for your own digital life, where you assume that no system, no connection, and no credential is inherently secure without proper verification and protection. It means being perpetually vigilant, unfortunately.
And perhaps, thinking bigger, it raises an important question for us all to consider as we move forward. In a world where our personal data is routinely exposed, sometimes due to our own mistakes, sure, but often due to corporate negligence, inadequate security, or sophisticated cyber attacks, how much more fiscally or even legally, perhaps criminally responsible should the data holders, the companies and organizations we entrust with our information actually be for protecting these vast treasure troves of our personal data? When does just disclosing a breach stop being enough? When does it become a deeper liability for not preventing it in the first place? It feels like a crucial debate we, as a society, really need to have more seriously.
It's a huge question. But for now, by prioritizing robust monitoring on our own accounts, adopting strong personal security practices like the ones we've discussed, and just staying informed with real-time threat intelligence, we as individuals, and hopefully as a collective, can do a lot to protect our own assets and try to stay at least one step ahead of the cyber criminals in this ever-evolving digital landscape.
Couldn't agree more. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and most importantly, stay secure out there. We'll be here for your next deep dive.